Thank you for taking the time to listen to today's story. I truly appreciate your comments, feedback, and thoughts. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to support the channel. See you again in the next stories.
Just sign it. My stepson smirked, sliding a manila envelope across the dinner table right next to the Christmas turkey. It's time he stopped being a burden on Dad. He thought he was backing a quiet, unassuming woman into a corner on Christmas Eve. He thought he was forcing me to sign away my home, my savings, and my dignity. What he didn't realize was that behind my quiet smile was 15 years of undercover federal investigations, financial fraud tracking, and forensic auditing. He saw an easy target. I saw an arrogant amateur walking straight into a trap I had set 3 weeks ago. Before you see how his smug grin completely vanished, drop a comment with the city or country you're watching from tonight, so I can see how far my story has reached. Now grab a warm drink, sit back, and listen closely to how my stepson's greedy Christmas scheme blew up in his face. My name is Clara, and at 38 years old, most people who meet me assume I'm just a soft-spoken homemaker who enjoys gardening and baking. They see the cozy sweaters, the warm smile, and the gentle way I handle my husband, Mark. What they don't know, and what I've never felt the need to brag about, is that before I met Mark, I spent 15 high-intensity years as a special agent for the federal government. I specialized in white-collar crime, financial fraud, and forensic asset tracking. When I retired early after a particularly brutal undercover operation, all I wanted was peace, quiet, and a simple life. Christmas Eve at our home was supposed to be the pinnacle of that peace. Soft snow was falling outside our dining room window. The scent of roasted turkey filled the air, and classic holiday tunes played softly in the background. But the atmosphere inside was tense, entirely ruined by Mark's 26-year-old son, Brandon. Brandon arrived that afternoon carrying an overwhelming air of entitlement. He wore a designer suit that looked far too expensive for someone with a vague consulting job, and from the moment he stepped through the door, he treated me like hired help. He made passive-aggressive comments about how nice it must be to live off Dad's hard work, completely ignorant of the fact that I brought my own substantial retirement savings into this marriage. The real trouble started halfway through dinner. Mark's phone began to ring from the study, a call from his doctor regarding an upcoming routine procedure. Mark excused himself, apologizing for stepping away from the holiday table. The moment the door to the study clicked shut, the temperature in the dining room dropped. The polite smile vanished from Brandon's face, replaced by a cold, calculating sneer. He didn't even wait 3 seconds. He reached into his leather briefcase, pulled out a thick manila envelope, and slid it aggressively across the crisp white tablecloth, stopping it right beside my plate. "Just sign it," Brandon smirked, leaning forward with his elbows on the table. "It's time you stopped being a burden on Dad." I looked down at the document, then back up at him, keeping my expression entirely neutral. He began to lay out his ultimatums with a practiced, intimidating tone. He claimed that Mark was getting older and wasn't thinking clearly anymore. He argued that as an outsider who had only been married to his father for 3 years, I had no rights to the family legacy. The documents demanded that I sign over my rights to the primary residence, waive any claims to Mark's business assets, and grant Brandon full power of attorney over our joint accounts. He thought he was backing a defenseless widow-in-waiting into a corner, using Christmas Eve isolation to force my hand. In that exact second, the quiet homemaker named Clara faded away, and the veteran federal agent stepped right back into the room. My heart rate didn't spike. My hands didn't shake. Instead, a familiar, cold adrenaline washed over me. I reached out and opened the envelope, flipping through the pages with a slow, deliberate rhythm that clearly irritated Brandon. My trained eye immediately began scanning the legalese, looking past the bold headers and straight into the fine print. Within 10 seconds, I spotted 3 massive red flags: forged notary stamps from an out-of-state office, irregular clause structures designed to conceal immediate asset transfers, and a clause that gave him instant access to liquid funds before the end of the calendar year. It was sloppy, desperate, and completely fraudulent. Brandon mistook my quiet inspection for hesitation and fear. He leaned in closer, his voice dropping to an arrogant whisper. Don't bother trying to read all the big words, Clara. Just sign on the sticky tabs and save everyone the embarrassment of a drawn-out legal fight. Dad belongs with his real family, not a leech. He sat back, crossing his arms with a smug grin, entirely convinced he had won. He didn't realize that every second I spent looking at those papers was another second I was building an ironclad case against him in my head. What Brandon didn't know was that this confrontation wasn't a surprise to me at all. 3 weeks prior, while doing our monthly household accounting, I had noticed subtle anomalies on our joint credit reports, unusual hard inquiries from offshore entities, and flagged identity checks. Anyone else might have dismissed it as a glitch, but my federal training immediately raised alarm bells. Working quietly from my laptop late at night, I utilized my professional network of retired federal contacts and forensic investigators to run a deep, discreet background check on my stepson. The results were staggering. Brandon wasn't a successful high-flying consultant. He was a desperate man drowning in a web of deceit. He had accumulated massive, dangerous gambling debts through illegal online sportsbooks in Central America. On top of that, he was under investigation by private auditors for creating offshore shell companies to siphon funds from his actual employer. He wasn't trying to protect his father's legacy. He was facing immediate financial ruin, potential violence from dangerous creditors, and a swift trip to federal prison. He needed his father's estate liquidated immediately, and he thought pushing me out of the picture was his quick, easy golden ticket out of trouble. Just as Brandon opened his mouth to bark another order at me, the door to the study opened, and Mark walked back into the room, rubbing his temples. "Sorry about that, honey," Mark began, but he froze when he noticed the heavy silence and the legal documents spread out on the table. Brandon's face instantly shifted back to a mask of concerned loyalty. "Dad, I was just explaining to Clara that we need to organize your estate planning for the new year." Brandon lied smoothly. But I didn't let him finish. I calmly reached under my chair, pulled out my own sleek leather portfolio, and set it firmly on the table right beside his fraudulent envelope. "Actually, Mark, Brandon was just asking me to sign away our home," I said, my voice dropping its usual gentle pitch and taking on the sharp, commanding tone of a federal investigator holding an interrogation. Brandon blinked, startled by the sudden shift in my posture. I opened my portfolio, spreading out high-resolution bank statements, offshore wire records, and certified forensic audit reports. I systematically broke down Brandon's entire financial life, laying out every forged signature, every illegal wire transfer, and every hidden gambling debt in painstaking detail. Brandon's face went from smug to confused to a ghostly, deathly pale as he realized I wasn't guessing. I had the receipts, complete with official federal stamps. Mark stood frozen in absolute horror, looking between the damning evidence against his son and the woman he thought was just a quiet, retired homemaker. "Clara?" Mark breathed, completely stunned. "How do you have all this?" I looked directly into Brandon's wide, terrified eyes. "Because before I married your father, Brandon, I spent 15 years as a senior special agent with the federal government tracking financial fraud. I know how people like you think, and I know how amateurishly you cover your tracks." The room was suffocatingly quiet. Brandon looked like he was about to throw up. I closed my portfolio with a sharp snap. "You have 2 choices tonight, Brandon, and you have exactly 60 seconds to decide. Option 1. You take your fake legal papers. You sign this complete waiver relinquishing any right to manage your father's affairs. You hand over the keys to the vehicle Mark bought you, and you leave this house forever to face your debts alone. Option 2. I pick up my phone, call 2 former colleagues sitting in an unmarked vehicle down the street, and let them execute a formal warrant for wire fraud and forgery right now in front of the neighbors." The arrogance in Brandon was entirely shattered. Tears of panic welled in his eyes as he realized he had walked directly into a masterfully orchestrated sting operation. Trembling, he grabbed my pen and signed my legal waiver without saying a single word. Brandon didn't even wait to grab his coat. He took his signed waiver, stumbled out the front door into the freezing Christmas Eve snow, and drove away in disgrace. He was forced to liquidate his own luxury assets and face his creditors without a single cent of his father's money to bail him out. Over the next few weeks, Mark and I worked closely together to secure all our remaining assets. While Mark was deeply heartbroken by his son's betrayal, he was infinitely grateful for my protection, realizing that my quiet nature had saved our entire family from absolute financial ruin. Looking back as I sit by the fireplace in our peaceful home, I'm reminded that you should never judge a book by its cover, and you should never mistake someone's quiet kindness for weakness. Sometimes, the quietest person in the room is the one holding all the power. Now, I'm curious to hear from all of you watching tonight. Would you have given Brandon the option to walk away and sign the waiver, or would you have called the federal agents and sent him straight to prison? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below.